You're welcome back. Last year, when the NNPCL became a commercial entity, part of the changes was that the company will no longer contribute to the Federation account, but will pay taxes and royalties to government and also dividend to stakeholders. Well, this was after the Group Managing Director, Mr. Melekiari, promised that NNPCL would be ready for initial public offer by middle of 2023. That obviously is June, and this would be to expand its capital base. Well, this has got a lot of Nigerians excited. Imagine being part of NNPCL, you know, and expectant. One of those was Dr. Ndi Okereke-Onyekwe, former Director General of the Nigerian Stock Exchange and the first female stockbroker in Nigeria. We caught up with her at an event then, and she shared her thoughts.
The only way we can save NNPC is to list NNPC on the stock exchange. For all Nigerians that want to buy shares of NNPC, even if it's 10 naira, 10,000, 5,000, 20,000, you can buy and become a shareholder. And if it's that NNPC is thrown to the market now, I guarantee you that 90% of the shares will be bought by Nigerians. Then the government can keep a little controlling shares, like about 10-15% if they want. But the government really has no business running business. Government has no business running business. So if they want to NNPC to survive, for NNPC to be what it ought to be to Nigerians, it has to be quoted on the stock exchange.
It has to be voted on the stock exchange. That's the view of Dr. Onyekwe there. And it's June now. It's just a day left. And we really haven't heard from NNPCL. It would be great to have them on the show. I did try to reach out, but I didn't get a lot of response. So NNPCL, we would like to speak with you about your preparedness. Or, I mean, when you be going to the exchange, Nigerians are eager to be part of this great company which controls the major resources of Nigerians. And, I mean, we had a bit of some of the advantages or benefit there. But let's try to speak from the eye of an analyst and see perhaps some of the hurdles on the way of NNPCL that have stopped them from listing, even as they promised. By middle of 2023. Joining us for this conversation is Calvin Emmanuel, joins us from our Abuja studio, Chief Executive Officer of Dairy Hills. I must say, Calvin, you are the one celebrating the holiday. I am just at work. I mean, that's so intimidating, your look today.
Good morning. Happy Eid Mubarak to you and all my Muslim friends who are celebrating Baraka de Salah today, Thursday, the 29th of June 2023.
Yeah, thank you so much, Calvin. And thank you for taking time out from your celebration to come on the show and discuss this very serious matter. Why do you think, in spite of the promises of NNPCL, the GMD had promised that by now they'll be ready to, list, we'll see an IPO, and a lot of Nigerians were looking forward to it. What do you think is holding them back?
Thank you very much. Very interesting conversations, and I agree with the sage, Dr. Okereke-Onyekwe, the former DG of Nigerian Stock Exchange, before it was demutualized many years ago, that the solution to bringing NNPC to become what it should be is it listing on the international markets. Listing on the equity capital markets. Now, it's important for us to understand that post-PIA, the PIA that says, for example, as soon as the PIA is signed into law by the former president of Nigeria, August 16, 2021, the PIA is supposed to go into full effect. The implementation of the PIA did not start in earnest. You notice that in 2022, the Finance Act 2021 was provided, and the provisions for the PIA was practically suspended, most of it at least. In 2023, if another Finance Act was provided, most of the provisions for the PIA was suspended. The NUPRC, NMDPRA, NNPC, that is now a private company, they're just beginning to come into the implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act. And you could see that, for example, with the most contentious one that was announced by the president, the suspension of the regulation of petroleum prices according to sections 2051, 2062 of the Petroleum Industry Act of 2021, that has seen petrol prices go up about 280 naira. And I expect also to go further up to between 650, 700, and even 750 naira per litre in some parts of Nigeria. So for me, when you look at NNPC, you see there are a lot of legacy issues that NNPC has. It had, especially before it went to become a private company based on the provisions of the PIA, and then before the policy-making powers of it was taken away from it to the regulators and the Ministry of Petroleum, why they focus on doing business. And you could see where Dr. Okereke in UK said something that I always say, that in truth, government really has no business doing business. NNPC has legacy issues, and one of those legacy issues that it cannot carry to become a public limited company is the issue of the moribund refineries that it has. The 4 moribund refineries in Port Harcourt, in Warri, in Kaduna, and I've forgotten where the 4th one is located. For me, in my opinion, they are moribund. It's time for the government to strip those refineries into scrap and sell them off and stop throwing turnaround maintenance. If you look at the balance sheet of the NNPC, you see about somewhere between 96 and 100 billion naira per year goes into welfare, compensation, and pension for staffs of 4 dead refineries that are not refining 1 litre of petrol. I don't think if you quote NNPC on the London Stock Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange, or you quote it on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, for example, as a public limited company, any sensible institutional investor will want to buy shares when he looks at the prospectus and he sees that it has 4 dead refineries that are taking 100 billion naira, or somewhere around $125 million per year, and it's not bringing back any revenues to the business. I don't think any sensible investor will want to put money into that. So for me, that is one major issue NNPC has to tackle. NNPC also needs to address the issue of the structure of JV contracts, a joint venture, and when it comes to the production sharing contracts that it has, and how it relates to the fact that before the implementation of the PIA, it was a state corporation. Now it's a private company. Does it make sense for NNPC to stay as a non-operator and then have block owners? NNPC owns a few blocks, have block owners, and then have international oil companies and national oil companies as operators. And then it has this structure where if, for example, it gets 900,000 barrels of crude oil, it has to amortize the cost of recurrent OPEX and amortize capital expenditure on operating that block to the operator of the block, which is the international oil company and national oil companies. NNPC needs to ask itself the question, do we want to build, as a company, build the expertise to actually become an operator in the market and compete with the IOCs? It also needs to ask itself the question on if it wants to stay in OPEC, because you can see that at the last OPEC meeting, for example, OPEC capped Nigeria at 1.38 million barrels per day. If Nigeria, for example, develops the capacity to produce 30 million barrels per day, and for example, you have your cap at 1.38 million barrels per day and you can't export more than 1.38 million barrels per day, how do you go around that, considering that the forward guidance of OPEC for 2024 to 2025 says that OPEC is going to maintain its cuts at somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million barrels per day, considering that OPEC members produce about 31 million barrels, 31.5 million barrels of crude oil per day, as a means to maintain oil price at not below $75 or $80 per barrel. So these are questions that you need to ask before you decide and say you want to go to list on a stock exchange, either it's in Nigeria, or it's in London, or it's in New York. In my opinion, NNPC has a lot of house cleaning to do, and it has a lot of business process reengineering and restructuring that has to be done within the company for it to even consider going. Because if it goes the way it is, investors, and especially institutional investors who know a lot about investments and the markets will not touch it.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a whole lot to be done before NNPC can be ready, to go public. But a lot of Nigerians would have expected perhaps Mr. Mele Kyari, just the way he said, they were going to be ready for June, could also come out to speak to Nigerians to say, oh, we are putting some things in order, we are restructuring from the public company we were, from the government company we were, to a commercialized company. Don't you think that will also mean carrying the people you expect to be part of this company along and winning their trust, along the way?
Well, I think it's important because you could see that there is a trust deficit between NNPC and the Nigerian people. Nigerian people don't trust NNPC with what it says, because especially when it comes to the administration of direct sale, direct purchase, DSDP, and petroleum subsidy, there is a lot of gap, between the company and the people. There are lots of issues that the company needs to come up to answer to on how that whole under-recovery on petrol subsidy was managed. But you also have to consider the fact that NNPC was a state corporation and it was getting directions from the government before it was privatized to becoming a private company. And it's important for us to understand that it's now a private company, and the way, for example, like Dr. Okereke in UK said, the way for you to fully move away from that shadow of the Nigerian government is to sell equity in the company, maybe 20%, maybe 25%, because it needs a lot of capex to fund projects. It has the Nigerian gas, Nigerian Moroccan gas pipeline. The FID is $25 billion. NNPC is supposed to contribute $12.5 billion for the project. It doesn't have the money. NNPC currently has payments, outstandings to oil traders for PMS deliveries to Nigeria in a few billions of dollars, maybe $2 to $3 billion it has to pay in outstanding. It has the floating LNG project it wants to do with the Norwegian company Gola. I'm sure that's a counterparty financing project that NNPC has to contribute to. These are capital expenditure projects, FID, financial investment decisions that require billions of dollars. Where is it going to raise the money from? The Nigerian government does not have the money to give it. Instead, the Nigerian government is expecting you to remit money. With the reunification of the Naira, for example, you see very well that the Federal Account Allocation Committee, FAC, has moved its target for the USD peg, for which NNPC has to remit money to the Federation account at the CBN, to the I&E rate, which means basically that if, for example, just for example, on crude oil receipts, NNPC was remitting $1 billion. Under the former regime of official peg and black market, where you had a 63% black market premium, NNPC was remitting somewhere around maybe 463 billion naira to the government. Under this new regime, which is a float and reunification, NNPC is obligated to remit revenues to the Nigerian government at the I&E rates, which has aligned with the spot rate at the last day's close. So definitely is more revenue for the government. So if the government is expecting money from NNPC, how is, for example, NNPC going to fund the project that it has? And so this is the reason why it's important that for the sake of improving the revenues Nigerian government gets, oil revenues in terms of that revenue to GDP ratio, and balancing their macroeconomic and the fiscal side of Nigerian federal government finances, for the sake of stabilizing the markets in Nigeria, for the sake of building trust with the people and maximizing the potential of NNPC for it to compete with its peers around the world, like Saudi Aramco, for example. You really need for NNPC to do house cleaning and go get investment bankers to do book building for it to float as a public limited company on the stock exchange and have investors bring in money so that, its internal controls and corporate governance will improve. It's also important for me to say, and I need to say this because the president sacked the boards of MDAs I think a week ago, before he traveled to France. It's important for me to advise the Nigerian government, especially the president, that in constituting the new boards, non-executive boards of MDAs, and for example, of course, NNPC is going to have a new chairman very soon, it's important to prioritize merit over political favors to party members for helping you win elections. For critical places like NNPC, CBN, NCC, and the likes, for example, for NNPC, you need a chairman of the board and members of the non-executive board who are very important for, compliance, audits, and controls to the executive management of NNPC as a company. People who have cognate experience and administrative and leadership skills, and not people who you're compensating because, we were friends 20 years ago, or you helped me win an election.
All right, Kelvin, thank you so much for those suggestions. It sounds like a whole lot of hurdles ahead of the NNPCL before they can get to the level of listing. But we'll certainly look forward to those days when NNPCL will be public and Nigerians can buy into it. Thank you so much for taking time out from your holiday and sharing this information with us. Kelvin Emmanuel, Chief Executive Officer of Dairy Hill Limited. Thank you.
Thank you.